Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with the 244th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. It is October 27th, my mother's ancestral birthday, and we are off to the races here with 30 some people, and we got a full agenda as always. We're going to go 2 full hours today. Last couple of weeks we've only gone one, but we have a separate session in the second session on energy, and we had a an incident you couldn't make up. They're trying to restart the nuclear plant in Palisades, Michigan, and we talked about this last week. A guy fell into the pool, but the nuclear industry overall is in deep trouble. And meanwhile, we get more and more indication that we do have the ability now to go 100% renewable worldwide. So we're going to do a separate unit with the second hour after 6 o'clock Eastern time today. First hour, we're going to have general discussion. Anybody want to pipe in? And then Mike Hersh has brought us a great expert in rural organizing, progressive organizing in rural areas. And then we're going to be joined by Dave Saltman, our great veteran newsman, to talk about the fact that CBS News, so-called, is now going to be Fox 2, except they're not going to say that they're Fox 2. They're just going to pretend to be the news, but they will be basically most likely following the current politics of Fox. And we're going to discuss how we form an alternative news network that can fill the void of what used to be the actual news networks. So that's the agenda for today. Glad to be all with you. It's a beautiful. I am in New Jersey. It's a beautiful fall day here. Not unlike the one behind me, which was my. You can't see it on radio, but it was my outdoor classroom at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio. So let's get jumping in here. I do want to raise a couple issues. First of all, Steve and freepress.org has published my piece predicting or advocating or whatever that this 90,000 square foot atrocity for which Donald Trump has torn down half the White House will, in fact, in due time, make a great homeless shelter. We know how deeply compassionate Donald Trump is and how much he cares about the poor and the homeless. So this 90,000 square foot, $300 million Trump Tower that he's appending to the White House after promising not to tear down any of it. But it will be, in its time, a homeless shelter and a soup kitchen. And then they can name it after Trump. They can call it the Trump Homeless Shelter and Soup Kitchen. That would be perfectly feasible. But they claim it's going to be open by 27, a couple of years. Given the um, competence of the Trump regime, I highly doubt it. But we'll see what happens. But he certainly has is intent on putting his physical imprint on the American psyche, and that's why this structure needs to become a homeless shelter. I also want to point out I did the math earlier today. It is now very clear. We're seeing a lot of articles about Trump's mental state and his advancing dementia. And I have done the calculation. And of the last 6 presidents of the United States, three and a half of them have had dementia. You start with Ronald Reagan. There's no doubt that Ronald Reagan was suffering from Parkinson's in the last couple of years of his presidency, and that Nancy Reagan took over, and she was not half bad. Nancy Reagan was actually a pretty good president, as presidents go, definitely ruling with a sort of a Marie Antoinette tinge to her, but she's the one who ended the Cold War. She was pro-choice, and as competence goes, she ran a tight ship, as opposed to Edith Wilson, who ran the country for a year, 1920. She was terrible, but Nancy Reagan, you got to hand it to her. She and Bush one, the vice president, did a pretty good job. Then you get to Clinton didn't have dementia, although a lot of other stuff. Then you get to George W. Bush. He was half there. I'm going to give him half. He was not totally demented, but he was pretty off. Then you go. Obama was not, but Trump won. Close. Biden definitely. Last year or so, Biden was definitely out of it. Should never have run for re-election. Should not have been president. Joe Biden, I believe, should have been removed. And now, of course, we have Donald Trump, and his first term, you hard to make the case, but he is very clearly losing it here, and so that makes three and a half of our last six presidents who've had dementia. I just thought I'd do the math there, and uh,
Hey,
so
Slugger,
yes,
real quick. I see Dr. Nancy's hands up, and she might want to
yes, Nancy, do you want to
weigh in.
contribute an expert opinion here on my layman's evaluation of the mental state of those presidents?
I would agree that Ronald Reagan had evidence of Alzheimer's, dementia before he was even elected the first time. His words were short, his sentences were short. He didn't have any complex thoughts, although, previously apparently there's good recordings of him being pretty bright and capable. George W. had the same thing that's affecting Trump in the first place. As a rich kid, he avoided getting educated. And so, Trump and George Bush, just like Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, there's stories about how they avoided going to class, paid other people to take their tests. So they're starting behind the start line. And the funniest thing I saw today but let me defend Biden. Parkinson's and dementia are different. You can have both, but they're very different. And added to that, Biden had the stutter he was sensitive to, so he talked softly to begin with. The Parkinson's made him more soft. Apparently, they've never admitted he has Parkinson's, but I think it's pretty clear he has Parkinson's. That's not the same as dementia. I think his brain works fine. He just doesn't communicate very clearly. The funniest thing about Trump that I saw today is he's getting these little screening tests for dementia, which says, identify the giraffe, that kind of thing. And he's calling it an intelligence test. A dementia screen is not an intelligence test, and it's hilarious. He
Well,
really is demented on top of not
well,
being,
it's hilarious until you remember that he's got his finger on the button, and
yes.
he's already blown up 10 boats in the Caribbean and killed at least 40 people. But I met Reagan, by the way, and the minute I saw Ronald Reagan, it was in New Hampshire in 1980. I knew he was going to be president. I mean, you
Wow.
could just tell. But the evidence of him having whatever it was, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, in the last years of his term are pretty strong. I mean, his son, Ron Jr., basically said he thought his dad had whatever. But on the other hand, you have to remember Ronald Reagan did respond to the movie the day after in a way that really was very important. Helen Caldicott met with Ronald Reagan in the Oval Office, and he then watched the movie on nuclear war that was watched by 100 million people. And he responded. I mean, that is really where the beginning of the end of the Cold War came. Never think that a TV movie can't affect history. And he was apparently at least somewhat affected by Helen Caldicott. So whatever his mental impairment, and it was pretty clear he did have mental impairment in the end of his term, second term. But that it was a pilot. There was some of Ronald Reagan that was there and that was decent and that made decent decisions. And people hate it when I speak positively. People on the left hate it when I speak positively about Nancy Reagan. But as a historian, evaluating all our presidents, and she was definitely the president. She was definitely running the country, as did Edith Wilson. She was not bad, actually. I also, by the way, had a conversation with H.W. Bush, Bush one, and he was all there. George H.W. Bush was a very smart guy, and he did not. He had he was morally impaired in many ways, but he did not suffer from dementia. MYLA RESON, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to push back for a minute on the statement that blowing up people in the Caribbean and the Pacific has something to do with dementia. I think what is happening is that um, Trump is doing the bidding of the oil companies like Exxon and Chevron, whose oil deposits were nationalized in Venezuela by the Bolivarian Revolution, the Hugo Chavez. So all of the reason that they're creating this narrative about blowing up drug traffickers is really just a screen to convince people that it's okay to interdict drugs from Venezuela, have a ground war so that the big oil companies can topple the government and install a puppet regime in Venezuela and take the oil back.
Right. And according to Greg Palast, who I watched his interview with Cesar Chavez, Cesar, the previous Hugo Chavez, according to Greg, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, bigger than Saudi Arabia. It's a different kind of oil, but
Right.
and clearly Trump wants that. They've been trying to get rid of the Venezuelan regime for a long time, and now the Colombian regime. And meanwhile, while all our federal workers are going without paychecks, we're giving Trump is giving 40 billion of our dollars, or 20 billion of our dollars, and 20 billion of some billionaires' dollars to the guy in Argentina who's an outright fascist. So,
Right. That's
here we are.
that's Malay, and that's actually bailing out a bunch of oligarchs here in the United States who invested in that cryptocurrency that tanked the Venezuelan government. So go
Right.
figure.
And I will say, life is full of surprises. Many of you probably aware there's a young woman named Tomi Lahren, I believe is her name, extremely right wing, very nasty. And she is going absolutely crazy against Trump because she comes from a cattle raising family. And Trump is talking about, or is buying tons of beef, literally tons of beef from Argentina to prop up the Argentine economy and to lower beef prices in the United States. And Tomi Lahren is going screaming at Trump for destroying the cattle industry in the United States. It's just like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's really been going crazy over the Epstein files. So, life is full of surprises, as a young woman once told me as she threw me out of her apartment. So, anyway, there you go. All right, well, listen, we're going to proceed now. Mike Hersh has a great new guest to talk about rural organizing. It's 2:15 Eastern Time. We'll go to 2:35 or 2:40. Mike, do you want to introduce your guest? And let's rock and roll. And then we'll go to Dave Saltman and talk about network news.
Yeah, thanks so much, Slug. I'll try to be really, really quick, but it occurred to me not that long ago that the Democratic Party is guilty of taking the inner city, the urban areas for granted, and also writing off rural areas as a lost cause. And the Republicans do kind of the opposite, where they take rural areas for granted and write off urban areas as a lost cause. And what that has led to is a bipartisan contemptuousness towards urban and rural areas, which gave rise to apathy and frustration and anger, and in a lot of ways fueled the rise of the Tea Party and ultimately Trump. And I can't really blame people who get taken for granted or treated with contempt and disrespect by the two-party system. And along comes the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, put together by our guest today and some other very brilliant people. Anthony Flaccovento is a farmer himself and a rural development consultant from Virginia, and he's been the executive director of the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, Ruby with an I, and he co-founded that in 2021, and it's coming along just at the right time to help heal the divides in this country and to reverse generations of disrespect, disregard, and not so benign neglect. So Anthony, looking forward to hearing from your presentation. I've heard from you before, and I can't wait for everybody else to hear from you. You're brilliant, and this is a message that we all need to hear. So take it away, Anthony.
Well,
Thank
Anthony,
you.
I'm going to be rude and jump in real quickly. Before you take over, I want to introduce you to Julie Levine. Julie lived in Topanga Canyon in California for many years. Very, very a great progressive, and she now lives in the rural reaches of the Sequoia National Park. So at some point, Julie, once Anthony proceeds here, you may want to come in with another rural point of view. So go ahead, Anthony, please.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. And Mike, thanks for that introduction. I don't deserve the credit you give me, but I sure appreciate it. What I'm going to do is show a few slides real quick, and this will give you a little taste of particularly one strategy we pursue, which is a public policy. Now, the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, RUBY, I'll say because it's too much of a mouthful. RUBY itself has several programs, including grassroots involvement we call Community Works. That's really going well. We do trainings around understanding the Rural New Deal, which we are focused mostly on people on our side, helping people on the left better understand why we're in this mess. But what I'm going to focus on now is the Rural New Deal as one of the elements. Why do we need it? What's in it? How can we use it? And I'm going to go through these
And
facts.
Anthony, remember that you're on radio as well, so we can look at your slides, but there are other people who can't. So be as explicit as possible, please.
I'll
And,
try to do that.
Sluggo, real quick, for people listening on the radio, you can watch this on YouTube, so you will get the benefit of the slides, and you can find that at grassrootsep.org, all one word.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, I'll do my best. That means I'm going to talk even faster. Lordy, that's tough for a rural guy.
Go for it.
So what happens when on the eve of the first Trump election, 2016, one of the leaders of the Party of the Working Class says, for every blue-collar Democrat we lose in Western PA, we'll pick up 2 moderate Republicans in the suburbs in Philadelphia. Repeat that in Ohio, Illinois, and Wisconsin. What happens when the Party of the Working Class dismisses the working class? And Schumer was not the only one to do it. Well, this slide, for those of you not seeing it, shows a map of the United States. And what it shows is that every single state in the country, with the exception of one, Washington State, moved towards Trump and the Republicans in 2024. Whether red or blue before the election, every state but Washington moved in the direction of Trump. And this breakdown by Daily Yonder shows that although non-metro areas, rural areas, continued the movement towards Trump, 5.2 percentage points more in the direction of Trump, the biggest movement towards Trump was actually in big cities, where there was a 7.6% shift towards Trump, and in the suburbs of big cities, an 8% shift. So while Trump's base is clearly small town and rural, he gained a lot of support in other places. The other thing that we've tended to do on the left, we've looked at some of the ugliest features of Trumpism, attributed them to pretty much everybody who votes for Trump. And we've dismissed most of Trump voters as being backwards, as being racist white guys, homophobic. And while that is clearly an element for some of the voters, that overlooks the fact that over the last 12 years, Black voters have moved 19 points towards Republicans. That's between 2012 and 2024. Hispanic voters, 29, and Asian, 17. And when you look at non-white voters without a degree, that is to say, Black, Hispanic voters who are working class, the movement from Democrats to Republicans has been a plus 37 for Republicans. So it's a huge mistake to dismiss everybody who voted for Trump as being simply a racist or an old white guy who's pissed off because he's lost his status. What is the underlying cause? Well, Ruby has publications and trainings about this that we'd love for you to consider doing. They're really, really good. But in a nutshell, the thing that binds many people who voted for Trump is a deep sense of alienation from the prevailing system, both political and the cultural mainstream, and a mistrust. And it stems from what the Frameworks Culture of Change Project called a belief that the system is rigged, that it's been rigged by a small group of folks at the expense of ordinary people, working folks, and others. This is widely shared across the left and right, but it's particularly acute, this sense of a rigged system among working class people. Why? Why? Well, some of it, of course, like everything, is what the right has mastered their narratives on Fox News and elsewhere. But the reality is that for the last 40 years, since Ronald Reagan, the bottom 80% of people have not fared well. Stagnant wages, job loss, most of all, economic insecurity as the enduring feature of these last 40 years, especially in rural, in factory towns, and among communities of color. Reagan promised us trickle down. What we've had is a suck up economy where wealth has been extracted from small businesses and family farms to big corporations, from Main Street to Wall Street. And this, while worse under Republican administrations, in fact, has been ongoing during Democratic administrations as well. This concentration of wealth at the top, this sucking up of opportunity and wealth from working folks and small business and family farmers has been going on for 40 years. On our side, we had Bill Clinton eliminating Glass-Steagall, which opened up the shenanigans of Wall Street, almost sunk the entire economy a little more than a decade ago. His championing of NAFTA and other trade policy that was utterly disastrous for hundreds, thousands of communities across the country. And until Joe Biden, we had 40 years of laissez-faire attitude about antitrust. In other words, let the big get bigger, and that has been phenomenally destructive of rural and small town economies. Add to all that the decline of unions, which has been precipitous, as all of you know, and you have the enabling of this extreme inequality. That has led to this very widespread sense, again, particularly widespread and strong in rural communities, of an anti-elitism, the sense that this rigged system has been rigged not only by the rich, but by people like us, by liberals, by Democrats, by intellectuals, academics, bureaucrats, and it's fostered what Kathy Kramer's called a politics of resentment. So that it's so strong and so widespread that in 2024, as this graph shows, the only groups income-wise to move towards Democrats were the very affluent, the people in the 96th percentile of earners and up, and the higher income folks, people between the 68th and 95th. So these are well-to-do people. Those folks moved towards Democrats. Every other income group, from the poor to the lower working class to the middle income, moved towards Republicans. That has also not only been an economic reality, but a political reality as the party has shifted its affectations, its symbolism, its priorities, much more, not just towards the wealthy elites, but towards the professional class, towards well-educated professionals, so-called knowledge economy workers. And as Larry Summers said when he was asked why he and others from the Clinton administration never visited Rust Belt cities that had been devastated by the policies, he said that displaced white workers weren't heavily on our radar screen. So the Rural New Deal, which we wrote in tandem with Progressive Democrats of America, published it 2 years ago, is, we think, part of the response to this that needs to happen. It's not the whole thing. Again, there must be local engagement. There must be investment in rural and other things. But the Rural New Deal I would highly recommend you look up. It's on our website. I think Mike might have already put a link to it in the chat. It is a relatively short and concise document. It's built around 5 principles. I'm not going to go into all of them, but those principles in a nutshell say we have to be flexible, adaptable, and work on locally driven solutions to the many problems rural and small town people face. And that these policies and programs should be worker focused, and lastly, that we have to promote local solutions rather than top-down big government solutions whenever that is feasible, because those are both more effective and more likely to gain support from everyday folks. The Rural New Deal has 10 pillars. They're listed there.
Go ahead, tell us what they are.
All right, real quick. Rebuilding farm, forest, and food economies, rewarding work and ensuring livable wages, dismantling monopolies and empowering and supporting local business, investing in community and regional infrastructure, rebuilding small town centers, cultivating self-reliance and resilience, investing in rural health care, fully funding rural schools, making rural and small town housing affordable, and relocalizing rural and small town banks. I won't go into much more detail for the sake of time, but each of these pillars then has a pretty detailed list of specific and usually field-tested policies that go into it. So for the first one, for instance, rebuilding farm, forest, and food economies, we talk about we need to dramatically expand access to affordable land, especially for younger, newer, and people of color farmers through things like land banks, land trusts, land farm matching programs. We need to penalize land speculation by big investors and the various corporations that are doing it. Each of these, again, each of these pillars has multiple specific policies to back it up. So they're not just pie in the sky ideas. We talk about supporting regenerative farm and food and fishery businesses, and then talk about the specific state and federal policies that will actually reward farmers and fisheries who are doing regenerative practices, investing in local food systems like building local food aggregation, processing, and distribution hubs, as we've done in Southwest Virginia. Similarly, with the second pillar, again, we move from the general idea of rewarding work and ensuring livable wages to talking about the need to adopt a federal jobs guarantee with a minimum threshold of a livable wage. We talk about eliminating barriers to unionization, and we talk about expanding and improving workforce development programs that actually work. And we give examples of those, like the Coalfield Development Group in Huntington, West Virginia, which has helped to launch, this grassroots group has helped to launch over 60 successful local businesses and created nearly 2,000 jobs, and then trained laid off miners and others to work in these industries, which include solar installation, sustainable mining on old mine land, construction, et cetera, et cetera. So again, for each of these things, we have both specific policies and examples. The last I'll talk about, so I can wrap up, is that we also 1 year later in 2024 published a user's guide. What is this Rural New Deal? But how do you use it? That user's guide is very pragmatic. It includes sample letters to the editor, how people might write about the Rural New Deal to lift it up to their candidates or even to not just elected officials, but to people in power. It has sample posts that one could use on Facebook or TikTok or other places like that, tweets that you might use, including a sample from this New York farmer or here from the Rural Democracy Initiative. So all kinds of ideas, as well as more traditional media, like when Katrina vanden Heuvel wrote about the Rural New Deal for The Nation and how you could be talking about and sharing those posts. Lastly, it includes ideas for promoting the Rural New Deal for candidates? Like, how do you promote it so that the person you know who's running for the state house or Congress or the Senate knows about it and is encouraged to utilize all or parts of it, as well as how candidates themselves can integrate elements of the Rural New Deal into their platforms, into their speeches, into their town halls and discussions? Again, every one of the 10 pillars has in the user's guide at least 3 specific concrete examples that bring that pillar to life. So I'm going to stop there and just, it's been a whirlwind. I apologize for that, but I
No,
hope
you're great. You're great.
check
It's
it
a
out.
great presentation, very coherent, Anthony, and we appreciate it. I will jump in and suggest that one integration you might do into this is the number one transition that's going on in the world in industrial terms, which is from fossil fuels and nuclear power to renewable energy. In particular, I was in the business of selling, well, not getting killed by the legislature, but selling wind farming to farm owners in northern Ohio, and every farmer in every house that I went to wanted to incorporate wind. And wind creates jobs. It does not eat up farmland. The footprint of even the largest windmill is less than an acre, and it creates huge amounts of jobs and rural wealth. In addition, we're finding that large solar installations on farmland actually increase agricultural production, especially when involving livestock. But even under solar panels, it's called agrivoltaics, and that again should be an enormous source of employment and rural wealth going forward.
I'll just respond to that the Rural New Deal does in the infrastructure section, and I think in the resilience section it talks about what you just said there, the shift and farm base. It also, however, cautions that we need to do that in tandem with farmers, because I can tell you that in a lot of agricultural areas, there's not a pushback about wind, but there is about solar. Some of it's misconceptions, but some is the fact that the agrivoltaics, while very good, they do make raising crops way more difficult. It's very compatible with grazing. It's much more challenging if you're producing vegetables or row crops. So there
Yeah,
are
but
issues.
you got to
There are
remember that.
issues, and these. I think the point of our thing is that they can be resolved if we bring farmers to the table in designing them rather than telling them what to do.
And you got to remember though that a part of the crop is in fact the electricity,
Well, yes,
and
for
it's
sure.
a huge generator. I did work with a guy named Dan Juhl, Juhl, in Minnesota for community-owned wind farming,
Yes.
and he developed a model, and I wrote with him a handbook, and I'll be glad to send it to you. It's 30 years old, but it's of interest.
No,
Okay.
community wind is a great model. Yep.
Yes, and he developed it, and we did a handbook. So I'm
Nice.
gonna Steve Caruso, go ahead, and Julie Levine, if you want to speak, raise your hand, please. You do. Okay. Steve, if you'll let Julie jump in here,
Go ahead,
quickly,
Julie.
then we'll go
I've
to
got
Steve.
video and
Hi
audio.
there. Thanks so much, Harvey, for including me. Yeah, I had to move to a rural, really a white nationalist Christian community in the mountains in the Sequoia National Forest in California. And it has been really an amazing experience for me. And I've found many of the things, although, of course, I'm in the mountains and whatnot, and it's mostly older people, but many of the things that you say, I completely agree with. I want to, you don't need my validation, but that's
Thank
one
you.
point. But I do also find that the homophobia, the sense that somehow the Democratic Party moved, toward, too much LGBTQ focus and all gender bathrooms, and they were all freaked out about their children, and this whole sex abuse propaganda, this whole pedophilia thing that got there was a film made about it that all the Christians watched and all the Republicans watched, but it was a very biased film that made it look like all the pedophiles, the Jeff, and Epstein and everything were all Democrats. So, all of this has fed, the Christian teachings and whatnot. And I think those also have been really big contributors in addition to what
Yeah, thank you. No doubt about that, Julie. I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on the right that is just insane and also incredibly persuasive. But the one thing that I would say, besides trying to counter them, you know, with those kinds of movies, the 2000 Mules, all that shit, is pardon me, I forgot we're on radio. The one thing we really can do something about is we can rebuild trust. This is kind of Ruby's fundamental. What we have lost is the trust of working people. By engaging locally, concretely as collaborators, by putting forward good policy, we build it. I'm going to tell a really quick story from my first run for office. I ran for Congress twice.
And I want to tell one too when you're done. It has to do with the Resnick and the Democratic Party. So
okay. Yeah. Super fast. So the first time I ran in this 9th district, which is very Trumpian, was 2012. And I was at a campaign event in a tiny little town called Lebanon, Virginia, in April of that year. And when I parked my car and I got out, an older gentleman greeted me. I recognized him. He'd been to a couple of campaign events. He was a retired miner, United Mine Workers of America, UMWA miner. And he looked at me and he said, "What do you think of that bombshell Obama's dropped on us?" And I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought it was something to do with the environment. And I just looked at him and he said, "You know, gay marriage." And then I remembered that just the prior week, Obama had come out in favor of legalizing same-sex marriage. So I said to him, "Well, what do you think?" And of course, what he said was, "Well, the Bible says it's an abomination." And he went from there talking about it. Marriage had to be between a man and a woman, blah, 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 all that. And when he was done, all I said was, "Well, I know it's really hard for folks. It seems so odd to people." I said, "But you know, the main thing I get from the Bible is we're supposed to love each other, especially people that are hard for us to love, people that are really different from us." And this old fellow, who no doubt didn't even finish high school, he says, "I guess you're right." And then unprompted from me, he says, "Well, I suppose they're just born that way anyway." So he went from homosexuality is an abomination to that's just who they are and I should love them in the span of a 100-meter walk. We were walking to my event. And I'm convinced that the only reason was because he trusted me, because he knew I'd been on the picket lines with the miners during the Pittston strike. He knew I'd worked on black lung. He knew I'd work on economics with them. And so that's what we have to regain if we want to make people less susceptible to these horrific messages, whether it's about gay and trans or immigrants. We must rebuild trust.
I agree.
Excellent.
You can't.
Julie?
You gotta. I'm sorry. I don't, Harvey. If you don't have time,
No,
that's
go ahead.
fine.
You wanted to tell a story?
No, I think that's exactly right, because we're really disrespecting people, and if we disrespect them and minimize them and make them feel or that we're thinking they're stupid or ridiculous, it's not going to build anything, and we're going to keep the divisions going. I think national health and vaccines were also areas where there was a lot of difference, a different understanding of what the government was doing. Yeah. And finally, I just want to say that the Resnicks have been very instrumental in funding the Democratic Party here in the Central Valley of California, where it's quite right wing here. And even though it's mostly low income and mostly Latinos, frankly. And the reason is because the Resnicks and others, primarily them, have given so much funds to the Democratic Party that they diverted water to their pomegranates, pistachio nuts, etc. They so the other farmers don't get any of the water, and then they prevented any importing from Middle East. They changed laws, and they're known to be really horrible. So unless we take a look and are willing to engage with others in a way that's honest, which isn't like on a party line, it's on a human being line, I think we're pretty lost. Anyway, that's it, Harvey. Thank you so much.
You said Resnick. That's the Resnick family, a big wealthy family that supports Democrats. I just have always wondered, as a Jewish guy, where in the Gospels does Jesus say he hates gays? No, I missed that part. We have 64 people with us. We'll go another 5 minutes, and then we'll get into the media. Anthony, you're great. Julie, great to have you with us. Steve Caruso, MYLA, Nancy, Lynn, and John Steiner. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, Anthony, you answered my question about rural solar. Ohio put a block in favor against alternative energy in Ohio and favored fracking in the east side of the state. We have now two gas power 200 megawatt plants going in to New Albany for data centers. So that's 400 megawatts. 550 acres could create 100 megawatts. So say, over 2,000 acres would give you that in place of the gas plants, which were already having air quality alerts in this area quite a bit more frequently. The other thing I want to bring up is on election science. Yeah, the numbers, when you look at it as they were handed down to us from the administration, that Trump won. And there is now studies being done in Florida and Minnesota. And recently, the Florida one is showing us that the numbers are inflated. This company bought Dominion, which is a poll book company, and they're partisan. It's just like Diebold saying, "Oh, I'm going to win the election for Bush Jr." So anyway, and there's extra votes. There's more votes in Florida than there are voters in this study that they found. And in Minnesota, they found out that Harris won by 6 to 8%. So I don't want people to be discouraged by the fact that these graphs are showing the Republicans are this and this and this. We had record turnout for registration in 2024. And I think people forget the momentum of what happened there. And I think it's been covered up by deceit and lies. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I will point out, by the way, my experience in Northern Ohio, we had $4 billion in private money prepared to fund rural-owned, farmer-owned wind power in rural Northern Ohio. And the legislature killed it with a single sentence in the Ohio Code. If that wind development had gone on, rural Northern Ohio would have been completely prosperous and would have powered the entire state. And so rural-owned wind power is a very, very big deal.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to bring up too was hemp farming. We've had two paper mills closed recently, maybe more, one in Ohio and one in Louisiana. Now, farmers were growing hemp and sold it as a product. I mean, we're all stuck on soybeans and corns. Why don't we educate farmers about hemp? And why are the paper plants closing?
A lot of that is going on. I mean, I've been working with farmers for many, many years, and whether it's hemp, whether it's sorghum, molasses, whether it's what we did, which was create a food hub to help tobacco farmers raise 20 different types of organic produce. There's a lot of that actually going on. It's just that our USDA system is oriented towards big row crops and towards the production there. So that's where the shifts have to happen.
Hemp is a nice row crop.
To the point about the farmers and the solar panels would only take, I think you said 500 acres. Look, we power our house with solar panels. We're huge advocates of panels. But the only point I'm trying to convey to you all, because I'm sure everybody on the call is pro wind, pro solar, pro renewable, is that there are unseen things that happen. When farmers in areas that have prime farmland start going and selling to solar developers, one of the things that happens is the cost of farmland goes up. So you have farmers already under duress now paying higher prices for land. So we just have to be more aware that there can be downsides that we have to take into account by bringing them into the conversation.
Well, but the key is if the farmers themselves can incorporate wind and solar into their crops.
Right.
The title of the handbook I wrote with Dan Jewell was Harvesting Wind Energy as a Cash Crop. And so if we can sell that, I don't have to tell you. Thank you. MYLA RESON, thank you, Steve. MYLA RESON and Dr. Nancy and Lynn Finerman, and then John Steiner.
Thank you, Harvey. So as you can see, to illustrate the point that you've been making, in Wisconsin last month, there was a huge development called Badger Hollow. It was the first large Wisconsin wind farm since 2011 that was approved in Wisconsin. And if you look at the story, I put the link in the chat. It talks about how there had been opposition that in the past that had prevented this kind of development, but there was a breakthrough where farmers were very involved in developing this, and it's going to help them to keep their land and to have that crop, as you were saying, that the solar, the electricity that's generated on their land is also a crop of
A
theirs.
crop,
I just wanted
yes.
to throw
You
that
know,
in. Go ahead.
Great, that's excellent.
Anthony, if you can stick with us, we're going to do a deep dive on energy in the second hour.
Sure.
And MYLA is right on target here with that. So can we extend this discussion of rural energy production to the second hour? That'd be great. Thank you. And thank you for that, MYLA. That's a very big deal. Dr. Nancy Lynn Feinerman, I don't know where John Steiner went. Go ahead, Nancy.
Anthony, that was an absolutely fabulous presentation. I'd love to see it more and more extensive. I would love to know I would love to see that related to the incidence of education. In the last half century, our education system has absolutely deteriorated. You know, the incidence of people who can't read keeps going up. And I didn't like history going through education. So I look at people like Harvey as a genius, except that I learned it enough
You
to
got
pass
to stop
tests,
taking those dangerous drugs, Nancy.
and I have a respect for it. And I fear that the choosiness of education, the dwindling of our education system is making people not able to appreciate all the issues that lean them toward voting for Republicans. Not even our president right now can apparently name the three branches of the federal government. I mean, that's just horrific. And our
Well, he doesn't
illiteracy,
believe they should exist. I mean, as far as he's
yeah,
concerned, there's only one.
but
But
he can't name them. And, our illiteracy rate just keeps climbing. And I really think I'd love to see how that relates to Republican voters.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely part of it. We know there's an education divide, and thanks for the compliments also, Dr. Nancy. I think the element that Ruby is maybe more tuned into, because there's other people and groups that research the education connections more deeply. The two pieces that we have lifted up related to education, one is that as our system for formal higher education has struggled, public schools and college debt and all of that. Simultaneously, we've also been, until very recently, disparaging basically technical education. And there's some exceptions to that. There's some great community colleges, but a lot of people don't want to go to college, whether they're capable or not. They want to work with their hands, and we've kind of made that a lesser career choice in how we've talked about it, as well as the investment we've put into it. So I know a lot of smart farmers and smart plumbers and smart electricians who have knowledge and education that most of us with master's degrees don't. And yet we've really disparaged that. So part of the kind of anti-education almost that you see on the right is this sense that that the left thinks there's only one way to be educated, that's a four-year degree and beyond, and that other forms of kind of self-education or technical education are much less. So if we shift that, we create a more, I think, broad support for higher education as well as technical education. That's a lot of what we talk about.
But I'm not
Good for you.
talking about technical education. I'm talking about a basic education, learning about things you're not interested in, won't have anything to do with your career. But we used to have a baseline education of Americans.
Yes, I understand that, and I agree with you completely. But my point is that there's also sort of an anti-education sentiment that's emerged where
Yeah.
people don't think they really need to know that stuff because there's a lot of resentment about the education system that contributes to what you're talking about. It's not the reason, but it contributes.
very interesting. We're going to continue, Anthony, we're going to continue this into the next hour with the focus on energy. I do want you to come back next week if you can, and we will expand on this discussion. Lynn Feinerman, John Steiner, and then we're going to go to Dave Saltman to talk briefly about the networks, and we're going to have to extend that into next week too. Go ahead, Lynn Feiderman.
Yes, hi. Great presentation, Anthony. I was wondering if, in talking about all of these issues with rural voters, rural farmers, et cetera, you were able to incorporate or discuss in any way permaculture, that being a system of perennial agriculture that uses renewable resources and et cetera. And it's also dovetails into the whole question of the human community and culture. And, you know, somebody like Resnick, he is like the pesticide king. I mean, and I'm wondering if there is any response, you know, any mass response in rural areas with farmers against pesticides, because it certainly happened in India.
Yeah. So permaculture is and not specifically part of the Rural New Deal per se. I don't believe we allude to it, but we do talk about climate-friendly farming practices, and permaculture would be certainly one set of climate-friendly practices. The less you disturb the soil, the more you develop biological, strong biology in your soil, microbiology, as well as the roots of plants. All of that stuff is part of reducing carbon footprint and sequestering carbon rather than emitting carbon. Farms can actually be vehicles for pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. And permaculture is one of the ways you do that. We don't do permaculture on my farm, but we do kind of a low-till approach with constant cover cropping and all that. And that's very much in the vein of what you're talking about, I think.
Thank you for that. Beautiful. John Steiner, and then we're going to go. Anthony, it occurs to me also next week, we're having two women come on who are refugees from MAGA and who were raised in fundamentalist Christian nationalism. And obviously, a lot of that is rural, and we would love to have you meet with them and help to network with them.
That's
That'll
on
be
the
next
3rd.
week. That's next week, yes. Okay.
I'll do my best. That's great. Thank you.
Yes, John Steiner, please, and then we're going to go brief as quickly as we can to a brief discussion on the media, which we'll have to also extend to next week. John
Hey,
Steiner,
Sluggo,
go
real
ahead.
quick, also next week, we're going to have Adelita Grijalva,
Oh,
who
yes.
was elected to Congress and prevented from serving by the Trump cult. So
And-
we're going to have a wonderful show next week. Not that
Right.
this was anything but a wonderful show. This was wonderful too, but we're just going to keep it coming. So Anthony, if you could come back, we'd love to
She's
connect you
also-
with all those people.
She's representing a district in rural Arizona as well. John Steiner in rural Colorado, and then we're going to go to Dave Saltman in very urban New York. Go ahead, John.
Anthony, and I just wanted to underline an obvious thing that you said about the gay marriage piece is that was your capacity to listen and how much just pure listening can also build trust. So, yes, it's what you went through with those guys, but it's just who you were and how you heard him. And it wasn't just listening. We can imagine that how you heard him from the heart and a degree of presence was part of what also went on.
Thank you, John. I don't want to give myself too much credit, but I do think that is part of it. And part of the reason I was able to listen to him is because I know so many people like him. And I know that whatever biases and prejudices as bad as I might think they are, I also know that that gentleman, like so many others, is just like a really solid human being, a decent guy who's doing his best to be a decent human being. And so when you come to know people in that way, then it's a lot easier to listen and to hear them out rather than scolding them. I think there's too much scolding going on. So I very much agree with your point, John. Thank you.
Well, listen, next week, the two women that we've had with us, Andrea and what's the woman from Denim
Jenny
Revolution?
Gage.
Jenny, they're right up your alley. So we're going to have a great session next week with you, Anthony. These women and also to talk about with Julie. There's a ton to talk about on the rural New Deal here. I'm going to take 5 minutes now, but And so stay with us, please, because we're going to jump into energy. I prearranged a separate section, and this is a big deal. David Saltman has we're going to give you 5 minutes, Dave, and then next week go a deeper dive.
Okay.
But we were talking, Dave and I, about CBS, and it appears to me and that CBS is about to become Fox without the truth in labeling. What do you think, Dave?
Why, they might be worse than Fox, because at least with Fox, what you see is what you get. But with CBS, it's coming in as the Tiffany network and all this, with a lot of baggage from its former days of glory, which, in my opinion, were very well deserved. Before I say anything else, though, I want to say to Anthony Flaccovento, that was a very inspiring presentation. And you actually gave me an idea. Harvey, you asked me earlier, what would be the possible way of setting up an international news network that could somehow replace the disaster that has become the American media. And Anthony, you gave me an idea for that in your presentation, because when you think about it, it's the same disaster. Harvey, you and I know that it is possible because we're both veterans of Liberation News Service, College Press Service, and a small nucleus of international news coverage that was actually quite effective back in the day. But I'm also thinking about the unions. There are a lot of the unions that have been, decimated in this country. Those unions also exist all over the world, and there might be a way of forming some kind of a coalition with all of these unions, which would be writers' unions. We talked about Ivan Klima of the Velvet Revolution, working with the writers' union in Czechoslovakia. These things exist everywhere, in every country that has any kind of, we could make the paper for the printing press out of the hemp that's being grown in Plattsburgh, New York. There's a way to combine all these ideas.
Excellent. It's really good. So Dave and I go way back, and we were talking earlier about how do we replace CBS and the networks that have carried the news media all these decades in the 20th century. Clearly, the change of the guard at CBS is going to take it into a right-wing mode. They won't be as blatant as Fox, as David says, but what are we going to do now?
Let me address that, because I don't think we can. I don't know if it's going to be a right-wing mode, a left-wing mode, or a no-wing mode, just a mode of ignorance and stupidity. Usually, when you go into a no-wing mode, whatever the last guy you talk to said, that's what you say. That's how Donald Trump works. Whatever the last guy he met tells him, that's what he puts out. So I think that I'm not sure you can ever get to where the old CBS was, because here was the difference. And this is what the changes at CBS are reflecting. We've been talking about Barry Weiss, the new they're calling her editor-in-chief of CBS News. Barry Weiss has never reported a story. She's never been a journalist. And by being a journalist, I mean, you've all heard the expression, Dr. Livingston, I presume. Everybody knows that. You probably don't know that expression, it happened in 1887, and it was the very first time in history. It was happened because the editor of the New York Herald, a guy named James Gordon Bennett, sent a reporter to Africa to track down the missing Dr. Livingston. And he went all over Africa.
Oh, and he found him. And Dave, we're going to stop there. Yeah, it's a great thing. And what we're having a real confluence here. I had set up to do a discrete hour on energy, and I want you to stay with us, Anthony. Everybody, we're gonna start off talking about the transition to renewables, which is going to play right into what Anthony and you have talked about. So can we, Steve? This has been a great show on the Green Grassroots Emergency Group Zoom. And now, Steve, let me say what needs to be said to introduce this next discrete hour. Steve Caruso, you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, take your time. I
Okay, here
can
we
cover
are.
that,
You ready?
whatever.
All right.
Yep.
Hey, everybody. This is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman. This is the Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. And we are doing a full discrete hour on the number one most important transition in industrial history, at least for the last long while, which is the transition from fossil fuels and nuclear power to renewable energy. We are coming out of a session discussing rural democracy and the changes in the news industry. And we're going to segue right in with you now to talk about the astounding multi-trillion dollar transformation from fossil fuels and nuclear power to solar, wind, geothermal, and batteries primarily. And it is going to changing the nature of our planet. It's actually going to define whether we can survive on this planet. We're going to go a full discrete hour, which will be usable for your radio network if you're running one, or if you're just a listener. That's what's going to come next. We are commercial free, and we are going to make this available to anyone who wants to run it on your radio network or just to listen to it for the coming hour. We have some truly great experts with us, starting with Ron Leonard, who's a pioneer in the renewable energy industry. And we're going to start with renewables and what's happening and then in renewables, which is actually, as a historian, I will say without holding back, that the technological and industrial and financial and ecological transmission to renewable energy from fossil fuels and nuclear power is probably the most significant step in modern human evolution. And it's a shocking transition because even people like myself who've been advocating for renewable energy for more than 50 years, we have all been flabbergasted and stunned by the unyielding economic leaps forward that are being taken in the field of renewable energy, primarily in solar panels, solar cells, photovoltaics, but also in wind energy, also in geothermal, and actually most shocking. That's a bad pun, but most shocking in the last 5 years in battery technology, which has absolutely transcended all forecasts for the ability of batteries to sustain the intermittence of wind and solar. And so at this point in time, looking forward to the future of energy, and I will say, by the way, and this is important, the United States, largely now because of Donald Trump, is being totally left behind in this transition. We are headed to what will be termed fifth world status. The United States, which was once recently the most prosperous nation in human history, is about to go into a deep depression because of energy, primarily because Donald Trump and the Republicans have decided to not only neglect renewable energy, but to attack it, which is it gives new meaning to the term Luddite. And at the same time, we have some great experts with us. I mentioned Ron Leonard, who's an expert in renewables. We have with us Carl Grossman, who's one of the great commentators on nuclear power over the last 50 years, and it has been 50 years, by the way. We have Tim Judson from the Nuclear Information and Resource Service, and Kevin Kemps. Kevin, our condolences to you. You recently lost your mother. These are four of the truly great experts. And so we have them for the next hour. We also have Anthony from the Rural New Deal, and we want to talk a lot about ruralizing, there's a term for it, ruralizing renewable energy, building a new rural economy around, especially around wind and solar, as well as biofuels. And really, we have a full hour here to cover the territory on the Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom. We have 62 people with us. This is a rare opportunity to really get a clean shot, and I guarantee you, on the very few other places on the internet will you hear this. So let's start with Ron Leonard. Ron has been a pioneer in the solar field, and we are just now getting numbers from Sunday. Ken Bosong is the head of that indicate that for the first time now, for the first year in the United States of America, we are getting more electricity from wind and solar than we are from nuclear or from coal. And it's a major transition. The Chinese, of course, have just gone way beyond us, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Ron Leonard, can you characterize for us at the beginning here, at the outset, give us a thumbnail of what's happening with solar, wind, and battery technologies?
And I'd love to throw in biomass and recycling just to be purist. And
Okay.
the beauty of what Harvey is talking about that would not make you depressed is the fact that in the United States, as we sit here today, we can manufacture 59 gigawatts of solar panels per year. And that should go up slightly next year, I know for a fact. And what does that mean? Well, if we installed all those panels in a year, we can do that, by the way. We've done over 25 gigawatts in a year. That would sort of even out, not diminish, but even out the increase in carbon pollution that we've seen in the last 2 years. And this is a game changer. This is a smart move. This is the right thing to do. And I want to tell you a little bit about the science. And the science is very simply two people that I know, Mark and Richard Perez, both Dr. Mark and Richard Perez, father and son. I put it in the chat a little bit about them. They have done the premier way of proving, they've done it in probably 12 countries around the world so far, that if you study a grid, you can come up with a way to produce energy on that particular grid with 100% renewable energy. And it is actually cheaper and faster to do by any other way of producing energy. And when you have those facts on your side, you can do the other smart thing, provide financing to make that happen.
And I will say, for clarification, just a thumbnail, a gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts, which is roughly equal to a nuclear power plant. I mean, when you think we have 94 atomic reactors commercial in this country, there are just over 400 worldwide. And by and large, a modern, up-to-date nuclear reactor is a gigawatt, 1,000 megawatts. Is that right, Ron?
And to confuse you even further, the United States instantly uses about 1 terawatt of power on any given day to keep the entire grid across the nation running.
Is that 1,000 gigawatts?
Bingo, you got that right. You get the prize.
So we need 1,000 gigawatts, and we can produce in solar alone 59 a year, and we have. Well, China is producing way more than that.
Well, China is installing, here's the number here, about 1/4 of a terawatt per year.
So
they start from nothing, and in that year, they are producing about 25% of the energy that we would use to provide the power in the United States. And it's working. It's cleaning up the air.
So you mentioned that the paras, father and son. We want to have a document that's readily accessible to everybody who can read or not read, that shows how exactly we can make the transition to renewables quickly and cheaply, and do it in real time, as the Chinese are doing. We're looking at investing in Ohio here. I have mentioned that a few years ago, was about 10 years ago, there was $4 billion in private capital that was earmarked for investing in wind power in northern Ohio, much of which would have been owned by farmers in rural communities, that would have completely powered northern Ohio, and in fact, most of the state of Ohio, created God knows how many jobs, saved all those farms because the income would have gone to the farmers, and the Ohio legislature killed it. And we now have this spectacle in the United States. It's staggering to see, of a federal administration actively attacking renewable energy. It's truly astounding. What has been the impact of this, Ron? And then we're going to go to Tim and Kevin, Carl, and Roger Rappaport in Michigan. But what has been
So,
the impact of the Trump attack on renewable energy?
well, obviously, as you would expect, many of those companies that had set up shop in the United States were doing this on the behest of the IRA, the Investment Reduction Act, that Biden has put forward and provided the initial seed capital for those companies to set up. And the other sad part is Trump, his Secretary of the Interior, has really put the kibosh on not only the largest solar installation that was planned in the United States, but the review that is necessary before you put in any large solar farm on public lands. And that has chided the simple fact that we really need to move forward now, not next year and the year after that. Every year we wait a year puts us behind the 8 ball. So we can do what is needed to do, starting out with putting solar on roofs, then move on to landfills and other what we call bad land, good for solar, bad for anything else. And in the next 2 years, we have plenty of solar projects that we can do. And I think we're going to probably see a change in next years after that.
Well, also, two things. Another place we really want to put solar panels is on aqueducts. There are 444 miles of aqueducts in California. They get run about 100 feet wide, and they are perfect for solar panels, because if you cover the aqueduct, you reduce evaporation by 80% or more. And the same with rooftops. We want rooftops covered. I have been negligent here. We are bipartisan, and I do have to say, and this is, up close and personal to me, because I live in Southern California, that the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has done at least as much damage to the solar industry as has Donald Trump. Because California was leading the world in solar panels, even, certainly per capita par with China. And we had a plan, a blueprint that was drawn up between 2016 and 2018 in the governorship of Jerry Brown. And it laid out in very totally professional, advanced capitalist detail exactly how California, which is now the world's fourth largest economy, by the way, we're bigger than Japan, how we were going to go 100% renewable and shut the two reactors, extremely dangerous, uninsured and now unregulated reactors at Diablo Canyon. They were going to shut. We were going to transition to solar panels. As Lieutenant Governor of California, Gavin Newsom signed that deal, which was 2 years in the making of all the best and the brightest on the energy scene in California. It was signed in 2018, and in 2022, Gavin Newsom killed that deal. I can barely contain myself. And and has set back California to the extent that we have the highest electric rates in the continental United States. These two reactors are continuing to threaten us all. And it has been Newsom. We had 2 million rooftops installed with solar in the state, and he has killed that industry and cost us at least 70,000 jobs. So Donald Trump is not alone in this, or the Republicans by any stretch. Ron, you want to comment on that? And then
Yeah, I purposely left rooftop solar for last because, frankly, if you look at it, this thing that we're talking about is an economic disaster. By that, I mean residential homeowners are now seeing energy poverty. And California was the first one to lead that charge because the rates in California actually doubled in 1 year. And then you see the fact that Mr. Newsom and his connection to the Energy Committee in California decided to pass a law called NEM 3, which says that if you put solar on your roof, you have to sell any excess power to the utility at 3 cents. And then they turn around and sell it to their neighbor next door for 30 cents, which extends the payback of a solar system, like 10 years. And there's no logical reason to do what he did. And in fact, it caused 110 companies to go out of business the year that was initiated. It started with, in California, 14% of the power coming on the grid was coming from these solar homes. Well, they don't want to give away their solar powered home for 3 cents. They put in batteries from then on, and they kept the power for themselves smartly. And this is a dumb move.
Well, beyond that, and Gavin Newsom, by the way, those of you who are thinking that Newsom is going to be a Democratic alternative to Donald Trump, his campaign for president, which he's clearly running, is being financed by the utility companies that he's enriched. And I have a house in Southern California. We signed a contract to put solar panels on our roof. And because of Newsom, that company went bankrupt. And I have not solarized my house yet. And because of Gavin Newsom, who I met once, by the way, perfectly charming guy, but come on, Newsom. So he is the Donald Trump of California when it comes to energy, and this is nationwide, everybody. This is, and if you look, and if you want to really be terrified for the future of the economy of the United States, look, the New York Times recently ran a couple of pieces on China's solar industry. And China is completely dominating the global solar energy market, which is the #1 growth industry in the world and will be for the foreseeable future. And what's happening now before our eyes, and I have kids and grandkids, and I feel for them because the energy costs in China are going to be a fraction of what they are in the United States because China is making the transition to solar energy totally. They are projecting to be 100% solar in China by 2040, which means that their energy costs will be 1/10, literally, what they will be in the United States. How are we going to compete? What is the future of the American economy?
And
John,
I bet you
go ahead.
that energy will be more reliable than ours.
More reliable because when Newsom killed the transition in 2022, he claimed that he had to keep the nuclear plants operating in California because of blackouts. He didn't have blackouts. The bottom line is the battery power has so rapidly advanced in California, despite him, that we will never have a blackout in California. I can say that 100% certain. Because of battery backups, we will never have a blackout again in California unless the nuclear plants blow up. which they could. And that could black out the grid. That's the only serious danger to a blackout going forward in California. John Steiner, go ahead, and then Steve. John Steiner, please.
Yeah, Ron, this is a question for you and the other experts on, and for Harvey. Is there any possibility of large private money coming in to kind of fill the slack until we get what we need to get, if assuming we get a Democratic administration sometime? I'm thinking particularly, Harvey, in Northern Ohio. There is money out there that could do this, but I don't know whether it can be organized and done in a way that works at the local level and regional level.
Let me
Well, that
speak quickly to Ohio, and then Ron Leonard, but he mentioned Ohio, Ron. What killed it in Ohio wasn't money. The money was there. It was all $4 billion in private money to put windmills on farms that would give lease payments to the farm owners. What killed it was a single sentence in the Ohio Code, which said you had to have a 1,500-foot back panel,
Setback.
channel
yeah, setback.
setback from the border of your property. Completely ridiculous. It was designed to do one thing, not to protect the environment, not to protect health, but to kill the windmills. And they did it. It had nothing to do with economics. John, the money is there. The money to go solar. Well, Ron, go ahead and speak to that, please.
So two things. Obviously, capital is necessary, and upfront capital to build any of these projects, whether it's your house or on a roof or in a big solar farm. And what has occurred recently is at the end of this year, December 31st, the federal tax credit for residential roofs goes away. So unless you, as a homeowner, put that panel up before that date, you lose a lot of the rebate that you would get from federal government and making that project much more economical. That almost happened the same way with commercial rooftop systems, large solar farms. What stopped that was large amounts of capital moving into the business before the second of last month and purchasing the equipment called safe harboring, the equipment necessary to do specific projects in the next 2 years and have them constructed by 2027. So we have capital. It's already moved. We can proceed for the next 2 years. We will have projects, but we need to do this in the correct and scientific manner in a way that's helpful to the ratepayers. And that is really the key, because if you look at the race in New Jersey right now, whether they're Democrat or Republican, the major issue for that governor is how high the cost of electricity is, and it's killing me. Think about it.
Right. And actually, New Jersey, where I am right now, had a tremendous boom in solar. That we had progressive governors who were very pro-solar. You got a lot of schoolyards in New Jersey with solar panels. But then we also, the state is subsidizing these 3 nuclear reactors. This is completely insane. And that's what we're going to face. I'm going to talk about that in a minute with Kevin Camps and Tim Judson and Carl Grossman on the nuclear side. John Steiner, did you want to ask more, John? Well, John Steiner is in. Go ahead, John.
Yes.
I'll pass. We can talk offline on this.
Well, we
I'm
know
here.
solar power, actually, of all the states in the United States, Colorado is geographically the best for solar because solar actually runs better in cold weather. And so you have 360 degrees of sunlight in Colorado, 360 days of sunlight in Colorado, but it's cold. And so the solar panels actually, along with the wind, which is great, of course, in Colorado, the solar panels work best in Colorado. Steve Caruso, and then we're going to go to Kevin Camps and Tim Judson and Carl. And I
Nine
don't
point,
know if Rappaport has joined us. Go ahead, Steve.
9.2 million solar panels are put out by that plant I had up earlier a year. That's enough to power 1 million houses. I had heard the guy running for rep in Indiana, Bartlett, on Tom Hartman on Friday, and he's saying that all these AI data centers are sucking power, they're costing energy, and they're sucking the water out of the ground, and people's wells are going dry. This is what we're up against.
Right. And the AI facilities, it really infuriates me, as you can tell. If you look at the aerial photographs of the AI centers, where they're complaining about how they have to build small reactors, which is completely insane. None of them have solar panels on them. They're all these giant one single story rectangular buildings, and they know, and they're whining and moaning about energy, and they don't have solar on the rooftop. So anyway, Tim Judson, are you on with us here, Tim?
I sure am, Harvey. How are
Okay,
you?
so
Turn
Tim,
his camera on.
oh, there you go, Tim. So Tim Judson has written the number one actually publication on the nuclear industry. Comes out of Paris. I can't remember the exact name, but Michael Schneider, wonderful guy, stayed with him in Paris actually. And Tim, you have written a chapter in the latest appraisal of the state of the world nuclear industry. And I do say, before I lose this train of thought, many of us often thought that solar and wind would get screwed by the federal government and shortchanged. I never thought we'd have a president of the United States who was attacking wind and solar. I mean, that's really dementia squared. Tim, can you tell us what the current appraisal is of the world nuclear industry?
Well, the industry is, outside of China, the nuclear industry is in decline, basically worldwide. And that's true in the US as well as a lot of other, formerly major nuclear countries. We have 94 reactors operating in the US today. That's with the two new ones that were built in Georgia and started up in the last couple of years. But that's still about, 11 less than we had 15 years ago. We're seeing, we've seen reactors close, but there's been, as a result of the fact that there were reactors closing in the last 15 years, basically because they're old and uneconomical. We've seen this sort of surge of political sort of support and economic support through bailouts at the state and federal level that have stopped about as many reactors from closing, as have already retired. And now we've got this the situation that Kevin's going to talk about in Michigan, with a proposal, to basically spend, billions of dollars subsidizing the restart of one of these closed reactors. I think but I think to kind of come back to something that you were talking about a few minutes ago, to kind of put this all in context, as of last year, there were 2.5 million megawatts of renewable energy and storage projects that are proposed around the country that are prevented from getting started because the utilities have not approved them to interconnect to the grid.
Oh, God.
And so we have basically as much, sort of renewable energy and storage capacity planned already, ready to go, basically, if the utilities would approve the interconnections, to really, push out nuclear and fossil fuels from the grid within the next decade. And so what's blocking that, is ultimately the utility companies, who don't want to see this transition happen and definitely don't want to see it happen quickly. And so they've been putting hundreds of millions of dollars into lobbying the federal government, not to mention what the lobbying they're doing at the state and local level, to get things done, like what Trump is doing. But this was happening even under Biden, this backlog of renewable energy projects that can't get interconnected. And that's also supporting the nuclear industry, because the nuclear industry is preventing renewables from coming online that would further challenge the economics of their of their reactors, and certainly would be many times less expensive than building new reactors.
It's astounding. It's staggering. It's totally anti-capitalist. I mean, what you're talking about here is the resistance by the utility industry and by the federal government to proceeding with technologies that are cheaper than what are being used. I mean, Donald Trump is, along with Gavin Newsom is protecting the utility industry in California. No doubt about it.
Governors across the country are doing it, Harvey. It's not just news.
Right. And they're Democrats. Let's be clear here. Shapiro in Pennsylvania, Healy in Massachusetts, Pritzker in Illinois, Whitmer in Michigan. I mean, all
Vogel
these,
in New York.
yeah, they're all Democrats, and they're all supporting nuclear power and opposing batteries, even though it's totally to the detriment of the ratepayers. It's staggering. So go ahead, Tim, and then we'll go to.
Yeah, well, it's staggering. It's harmful to ratepayers. Not only because look, people want renewable energy, and and renewable energy is more reliable than than the fossil fuel and nuclear plants that that it'd be replacing. But it's also hurting ratepayers because with all of the new data centers that are coming online, there's now this power crunch that's driving up the cost of electricity. And so people are getting hit with 2 and 3 times increases in their power bills. And also in part because we're not building the fastest energy sources there are to build right now.
Right. Solar, and you can do a solar plant in 2-3 years, depending on your permits, a big one. And you
Yeah,
can't
well,
even,
I mean, what once they start construction, wind and solar plants go up in a year, in less than a year, maybe 2 years at the most for the largest ones.
right. As
And
opposed,
ironically, compared to nuclear plants, like they always come in on schedule and on budget.
yeah, right. Yeah, or under budget. And you cannot build, even if you have all your permits and all your hardware, you can't build a nuclear plant in less than 5 years. Nobody's ever done it. And
Oh, I mean, the construction time alone is 10 years on average in the US or
right,
longer.
even with all your permits. And
Yeah.
solar you can do
18 years to plan and build the reactors in Georgia that just came online.
and these small reactors that they're hyping like crazy don't exist. They don't exist, for God's sakes. They're talking about the 2030s if they're lucky. And all this hype is going into small reactors, and it's a myth. Unicorn unit 1 and 2. It's ridiculous. And meanwhile, solar continues to get cheaper. And again, anybody look up on the New York Times or any articles about what China is doing with solar, and you will weep for the future of your children and
Well,
your
and
grandchildren.
Harvey, the irony to Trump's attacks on renewables and the repeal of the tax credits for wind and solar that they did just over the summer is that even without the subsidies from the federal from the federal government, wind and solar are still 2 or 3 times cheaper than it would cost to build a nuclear plant that gets those subsidies.
And let's say that again. It's not 10 or 20%. It's 200 or 300% cheaper to go solar than it is to go nuclear, even if we knew what nuclear would cost. And Trump wants to build more coal plants. I mean, how do you invent somebody who wants to do? At least Gavin Newsom's not talking about building new coal plants, but he is wants to keep 2 42-year-old reactors that are uninsured and now unregulated. Another thing we're going to talk about, I want to talk to Kevin Camps here quick, to talk, and Mike, if you don't mind, about what's going on in Michigan.
Well,
But
Sluggo, real quick, I just wanted to say, speaking of unicorns, are there any Republican governors who are standing up against nuclear power? Because you implied that all the Democrats were supportive and only Democrats were supportive.
No, I mean there aren't any Republican governors that are opposing nuclear, and there's a lot of them that are supporting it. It's pretty much, I mean, what's happened over the last decade as a result of this, this sort of lobbying and propaganda campaign that the nuclear industry's been doing, is they're sort of built a sort of a bipartisan consensus both within the DC Beltway, and across state capitals. Which is a new thing, and I think it's partly why you're seeing some of the support that's happening is because there's this sense that this is one of the only things that Republicans and Democrats agree upon.
right, but I will say there are some governors, especially Iowa and maybe Texas that are pro-wind. You know, the number one, by far, by the way, the number one state for wind power in the United States is Texas. The wind is so powerful in West Texas, but it's actually become too cheap to meter. If you live in West Texas, you get your electricity free at night because they got to get it off the grid. So you can bake your cake and do your laundry and, tape Pornhub through the night for nothing in West Texas. And the Texas government is not anti-wind, and a majority of the power, more than 50% of the electricity in Iowa is generated with wind. So those governors are, a little wary when it comes to wind power, right, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. Texas is also there's also a backlash going against renewables now in Texas because it has actually reached the point where it's pushing out fossil fuels and nuclear. And so the politics of the incumbent energy industry is even hitting Texas. Now they're still building a lot of wind and solar in Texas, but for instance, they were passing legislation this year that would basically tamp down on it.
Right. And I got to say, the wonderful Los Angeles Times ran one of the sickest articles I've ever read, claiming that a surplus of solar energy in California was costing ratepayers money. Meanwhile, they're running these 2 atomic reactors at incredible cost. Sometimes you just got to flip out. I want to go to Kevin Camps now, who is the great expert with Roger Rappaport. I don't know if Roger's joined us on the Palisades atomic reactor, where a worker has fallen into the pool, the radioactive pool, fallen physically into the pool at Palisades. Can you even begin to describe what's going on at Palisades, Kevin, and with a Democratic governor in support?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Palisades has had a number of pretty remarkable incidents just in the past week or so. Harvey mentioned the worker actually fell into the reactor cavity, and luckily for the worker, the reactor cavity had water in it. They probably would have died if there was no water in it, but they did ingest water that is radioactively contaminated, so that's an internal exposure. They swallowed some. They also got contaminated externally. There was a decontamination operation performed on them, but they probably still had some lingering external contamination, which means that everybody they came in contact with at the plant, but also the ambulance crew that took them to the hospital, the doctors and nurses, were exposed to some level of ionizing radioactivity from the incident. So that was on October 21st. Then on October 22nd, it was reported at the NRC incident report website that Palisades had an exceedance of their allowable release limits for hydrazine into Lake Michigan, which is a ultra toxic chemical, carcinogenic. And that's pretty remarkable because the limits for hydrazine releases are shockingly high at Palisades. And again, the state of Michigan under Governor Whitmer, a Democrat, just approved the renewal of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System last July. Despite our best efforts, a coalition of more than 70 organizations urging the state to not allow Holtec to use Lake Michigan as a radioactive wastewater and toxic chemical industrial sewer. So that just happened. Another incident that Tim Judson brought to our attention today was a worker, perhaps, they weren't real clear about who, but it probably was a worker, left empty alcohol bottles, 3 of them, in the protected area. And the incident report is pretty confusing. Like I said, it's not clear who this person was. They accidentally left the empty alcohol bottles in with some empty non-alcohol bottles, which for some reason they took into the protected area. And, over the decades, there have been some pretty remarkable reports of what's called fitness for duty violations at nuclear power plants, whether it's alcohol
You mean the guys were drunk?
usage or
the guys who were running
drug, or drugs,
drunk or stoned.
Alcohol, drugs. This incident I'm about to describe just happened 2 weeks ago at Palisades, but it hasn't been captured in an NRC incident report. So we haven't gone public with it, but so I'll just put it out there. 7 workers got fired at Palisades from the same contractor company called Champion because they were performing a pole dance routine I think in the protected area in a break room. And there was stripper glitter, which is another substance that probably shouldn't be in the protected area at a nuclear plant. And the backside of the story was that the reason that the pole dancing got reported was another worker had stolen parking passes. There are close to 2,000 workers at Palisades right now. So parking is at a premium and they have to bus people in from quite a distance away. So if you can get a hold of a parking pass and perhaps even sell it, you're good to go. So the person who stole the parking passes got busted, and to try to preserve their job, ratted out the 7 other workers involved in the pole dance. So you can begin to see what's going on at Palisades, but much more significantly than pole dancing are the safety risks, the steam generator tubes that Holtec drove into the ground because they didn't do safety maintenance on them. There's a high likelihood that in the first months after restart that at least one tube is going to burst, but one tube bursting can lead to a cascading failure that can lead to a meltdown. So these are the risks being taken at Palisades, using public money to the tune of more than $3 billion so far. But they've asked for just for the restart, they've asked for over $8 billion. They've asked for another $7.5 billion for 2 small modular reactor new builds at Palisades. So we've been referring to it as a nuclear nightmare for the past 3.5 years since these various schemes were announced by the governor of Michigan, by Holtec. In response, we're doing our annual Zombies Against Palisades, ZAP, protest rally at Congressman Huizinga's office this Friday on Halloween. It's street theater of the absurd because the risks and the costs and the liabilities that we're facing in Southwest Michigan and beyond are absurd. So we're trying to point that out. There's a lot more to say, but I'll throw it back to you, Harvey.
Well, this is the state of the nuclear power industry. Carl Grossman, I'll go to Tasaka in a minute, but Carl, you've been with the industry for 50 years. Because of the federal shutdown, we now don't have a nuclear regulatory commission on the case. Do you want to comment on that, or give it to Tim or Kevin on that one?
Well, there never was much of a regulatory process here. It was NRC not really caring. But now with the shutdown, it's minimal to put it lightly. But the point I would make is that there's an awful lot of work, an awful lot of education, an awful lot of organizing and action that still needs to be done. We just can't be, I don't know, for example, here's a piece in the New York Times 4 days ago, October 22nd, more than 4 days, 6 days ago. China is quickly becoming the global leader in nuclear power. Okay, it's pushing solar, but the piece goes on, with nearly as many reactors under construction as the rest of the world combined. While its dominance of solar panels and electric vehicles is well known, China is also building nuclear plants at an extraordinary pace. Or here's from the New York Times, October 14th, a week and a half ago. Renewable energy is booming despite Trump's efforts to slow it down. And the piece is topped with how the Trump administration and its allies in Congress have rolled back clean energy tax credits and thrown up roadblocks to renewable energy projects. Efforts in the long run will mean fewer wind and solar farms will be built than otherwise would have, but any meaningful slowdown in the growth of renewable energy and battery storage in the U.S. is likely to take a few years. But the piece continues that in a few years, if Trump is there for any length of time, the news is not going to be good in the long term. And in terms of Newsom, I live in New York, and here's Governor Kathy Hochul directs the New Power Authority to develop a zero emission advanced nuclear energy technology power. She's pushing nuclear like fairly well. She has a plan now for $30 billion bailout from the old nuclear power plants upstate. Again, what we're fighting against, although well, just go to Mark Jacobson's book, No Miracles Needed. No miracles needed. We can get all the energy we need from safe, clean, green energy we can live with, led by solar and wind. But to get from here to there with this idiocy, with this intransigence, with this push by vested interests to continue with nuclear power is going to take again a lot of work, a lot of energy, and a lot of commitment to what's needed, what's real, what can in fact work.
Well, the good news is that the money is on our side. That in any reasonable capitalist equation, the transition to solar, wind, geothermal, and batteries is completely profitable. If you subtracted everything else, all the danger of nuclear power, all the radioactive waste, all the health impacts, all the positive impacts of renewables, get rid of all that and just evaluate solar, wind, geothermal, and batteries alongside fossil and nuclear. It's hands down. The green energy wins totally. And by a factor, as Tim points out, of 300%, for God's sakes. That's why, again, anybody who really is serious about this, dig up that New York Times article on China's solar industry. It's terrifying for an American to see what's going to happen to our economy based on this energy transition. Tatanka Bricka, then Mike, and then I want to go back to Ron Leonard and get deeper into the numbers. I don't see Roger Rappaport here to talk about Michigan, but we'll continue. Tatanka, please. And then Mike, we only have 12 more minutes. This really went fast. Tatanka, please, and then Mike.
Yeah, you said much earlier at the beginning of this, Harvey, about it's anti-capitalist. Now, a little bit more nuance than this. Who's capitalism? It's anti-capitalist to people who want a democratic and a clean solution. It fits perfectly with the large corporate captured monopolistic and making the part of the reason why I think China is developing so quickly on nuclear as well. You have to get into the military budget, which is nearly $1 trillion, okay, in our country alone. So what you have, and I want to bring up something else. We talk a lot about all the secrets coming out, the Epstein secrets, the JFK, the 9/11, that basket of secrets that, one of the things that's in there is the over 5,000 stolen by the federal government, over 5,000 patents from people, ordinary people. I don't even have to get into reverse engineering ET technology. The over 5,000 patents of energy solutions that take into account the new physics. That is energy solutions where we have much more efficient energy than even solar and wind. Okay, so when you look at that and you understand that at the global level, which is determining a lot of this, the oil companies, the extractive industries, is wedded also to the military budget. We don't even know how much lobbying and how much money is going for the corporate captured solution, the monopoly capitalist solution versus people's
Right.
capitalist solution. So to really understand why this is so, we can't underestimate that, because the goal, and I won't go into it, the goal of the last 50 years of the extractive industries was by in the 2020 and moving forward, they intend to incorporate all the renewables, but own the entire energy grid and do it on their time frame. We don't have the time on their time frame to take care of our planet and really seriously address the global climate change disaster. And we don't have time to mess around with the impending nuclear potential disasters that are going on unless we come to another way of viewing this whole thing.
Okay.
Okay, that's another whole discussion, but I need to bring that up.
Yes, thank you for that, Tatanka. And Anthony Flaccovento, you're with the Rural New Deal, and I hope you will next week will rejoin us and continue with this. But a lot of this is based on rural realities. If the ownership of the wind industry can be taken over amongst in the farm community, which it should be, and if the solar panels that go on the rooftops are owned by the owners of the buildings as opposed to the centralized utility companies and the fossil nuclear industry, there's a major shift towards democracy that has to come with us, as well as with biofuels. I will remind you, and Anthony, you may know that the two greatest early advocates of hemp in the United States were Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, who wrote to each other about how much they hated growing tobacco. Tobacco is very difficult to grow, but hemp, you just throw the seeds in the ground, and in the fall you have a 10-foot plant and an 8-foot federal agent. But at any rate, we're almost out of time. This has been a great session. We still have 58 people with us, the longest attention span of any gathering in America. But the bottom line is this: as Tim Judson has shown, and Kevin Carl, that the nuclear industry is no longer competitive. It's completely been priced out by renewables and by battery technologies. And the transition that needs to be made is being made in strict capitalist terms, is to solartopia, to a green-powered Earth. And what's standing in the way is something we never anticipated, which is the President of the United States actively assaulting the capitalist imperative towards renewables at a time when China, our chief competitor in global economy, if we're even competitive anymore, is going 100% green. I mean, they are building nuclear plants. There is a military explanation for that. And in the meantime, they are literally 10 times more pushing a factor of 10 more going to solar and wind than we are. The American economic future, if it stays on this fossil nuclear path, we're doomed. Our energy costs will be literally 10 times what the Chinese are. We will have no standing in the global market, and that includes electric cars, by the way, because the Chinese electric cars are far superior now to anything the Americans are making, including the Teslas. Mike Hersh, Lynn Feinerman, MYLA RESON, and we're almost out of time.
Yeah, real quick, Sluggo. I just wanted to remind you, you had a really good line the other day. You said the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is out of commission.
Yes.
And the entire federal government is out of commission. So, they're out of commission. The government's out of commission. Trump's out of commission. This whole damn country's out of commission. But we are going to be able to turn it around. And I hope that we could just have a couple of minutes to hear from John Brakey, a quick report on his court victory,
Yes.
so we could have some good news to go along with all the doom and gloom.
Yes. Well, after the top of the hour, John, at the top of the hour, we want to get you in, because I do want to have a unit here of an hour to present to radio stations. The bottom line, is the solar-topian transition. We need the definitive document. If anybody wants to work with me on it, to lay out exactly how the United States can and must go 100% renewable. I wrote a book about it in 2007. I went back and I was clearly quite stoned when I wrote the book. But this time it's all straight numbers. And the bottom line is that if you're just a pure capitalist and you want to devise a country where its electric costs are the absolute cheapest, you will go solar. Solar, wind, geothermal, and batteries. That is where it's at now. And Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump have been equally guilty in attacking that obvious path. Lynn Feinerman and then MYLA RESON and then Robert Cesario, and then we're almost done with this hour. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yes, I wanted to link into what Harvey was saying about hemp and Jefferson, et cetera, and also it links to what Tatanka was saying about all those patents that were bought up by the government and then obscured. Hemp at one time in the United States was required from everyone who farmed. If you did not farm hemp, if you did not deliver enough hemp to the government for rope and et cetera that was used during the maritime period, you were jailed. You were arrested and jailed. And the oil companies came in and turned that entirely around when they wanted to obscure hemp. And the truth is that hemp can replace the entire fossil fuel petrochemical industry. You put hemp in plastics and it's entirely biodegradable.
Right. And it's true also, by the way, of the paper industry. A lot of people blame the Hearst family for burying hemp. That Jack Herer's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, the hemp newspapers, the Hearst family owned forests, and they didn't want the hemp being used for the paper. Ben Franklin made paper from hemp, by the way, Lynn. So that was a big part of it. I do want to make sure I get Kevin Camps and Tim Judson in, and a quick word from Roger Rappaport before we only have 3 minutes left on the hour. We'll come back to you after the top of the hour. MYLA, very quickly.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind people that there is an expanded recall on radioactive shrimp. Martha Stewart and Consumer Reports are talking about it. It's contaminated with cesium-137, which is created by nuclear fission, specifically a byproduct of uranium-235 and plutonium-239 in nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons. Where is this cesium-137 coming from? And so check it out. Consumer Reports says that it's all kind of within safe limits. Don't believe it. Don't look out for radioactive shrimp.
Yes, and it's mostly clearly coming from Fukushima. So something bumped in there. Clearly coming from Fukushima. Robert, I'll get to you in a minute, but I did want to give
Harvey, can I just refer people, if they go to Martha Stewart, they can find a list of all of the brands that have been recalled.
Wow, amazing. Very quickly, Tim Judson, Kevin Camps, and Carl Grossman, do you have a final word? And then Ron Leonard, and then we've filled our full hour here, but we'll continue. Kevin?
Yeah, I'll just kick it to Roger since he's on about
Roger
Palisades.
Rappaport. We were talking about Palisades and the fall of the nuclear industry. Do you want to throw in a couple words about the lack of a nuclear regulatory commission or whatever, and then we're going to move on?
Do you want to move on to the 6 o'clock hour, or do you want to just?
No, we'll continue after the 6 o'clock hour. I just want to do, let's do it now, actually. We're going to sign off very quickly here on this, but we'll continue. This has been a full hour on the question of energy and the transition to solar-topian technologies, and as both in the rural areas and in the country as a whole, and the fact that the Chinese progress on solar, wind, and batteries in particular are leaving America in the dust. If anybody wants to contact me, I'm at solartopia@gmail, SOIRTOPIA@gmail.com. I'm looking to collaborate to produce a definitive document showing exactly how the United States, despite Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump, can convert to 100% renewable. So write me solartopia@gmail. I want to thank Steve Caruso, Mike Hersh for producing this. This is available for use on any radio station in America. Thank you so much. This has been the Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom, and we will see you in Solartopia. Okay, we'll continue now. We can go another 20 minutes to 4:20 Eastern Time. Roger Rappaport is a great reporter from Western Michigan and has been following the Palisades story along with Kevin Camps in particular. Roger, do you want to tell us the latest development at Palisades?
Well, I think before we go to that, I think we all want to congratulate Kevin. He can share some very good news about a plan to create a nuclear disposal site in New Mexico. Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about that victory? I think that's really important. You spent many years working on it.
Yeah, sure. Just about 2 weeks ago, Holtec surrendered, admitted defeat in New Mexico, divorced their New Mexico business partners called Eddie Lee Energy Alliance, 2 counties in southeastern New Mexico, and pulled up stakes on what would have been the largest high-level radioactive waste dump in the world. 100,000 metric tons up to 173,000 metric tons of high-level radioactive waste targeted at that site, which is a lot because there isn't yet 100,000 metric tons in the entire United States. So they were planning for the future or planning to import from other countries or planning to include military wastes, but they didn't get away with it in New Mexico. We still need to stop Holtec in other states from doing the same thing. They're looking at Arkansas. I believe they're looking at Colorado, probably many other places. We also have the dump in Texas called Interim Storage Partners, which, like Holtec, had an NRC license approved. So that's more good news. We've stopped dumps that have already been licensed, including in Utah, where Holtec was also a partner. So we've stopped the Yucca Mountain dump in Nevada. That effort was led by the Western Shoshone Indian Nation. And the New Mexico site was also rich in indigenous connections.
And Kevin, I think you should add a note.
Indigenous nations.
Kevin, I think you should add a note, not just that this prevented these sites from opening, but the transport was from all over the country, from shipping ports, railroad lines, truck lines. It wasn't just the endpoint, but the fact that all this hot nuclear waste was going to travel cross country on major highways and waterways and so on. So it had impact in every part of the country, correct?
Yeah. Just to finish that thought real quick, the list of indigenous nations connected to the New Mexico site was a couple dozen long, and it's also a Latinx area majority. So New Mexico, majority, minority state, minority, majority. The indigenous and Latinx population is the majority of the population of the state of New Mexico, especially in the southeastern area. So yes, the mobile Chernobyl, that's a phrase that NEARS originated. You could also talk about dirty bombs on wheels. That was Mary Olson's idea. Mobile X-ray machines that can't be turned off. That was Mary's sister Lauren's idea. The transportation would bring the high-level radioactive waste into close proximity to many tens of millions of people in the United States. And granted, people live near nuclear power plants where that waste is located. But when you start shipping it through the major urban centers of our country, that is a high-risk activity, including for security reasons. And so I will put into the chat some fact sheets, including one that showed that along the rail routes in West Texas, I forget the exact figure, but more than 90% of the people that lived along those rail routes that would carry the waste to the Texas dump, the New Mexico dump, are Latinx. Close to half do not speak English well. And all the proceedings for licensing these dumps were held in English, not in Spanish. Not
And
even
thank you for
basic
that.
documents in Spanish.
And thank you for winning that victory, Roger. Thank you for bringing it up. We do
Yeah,
have
and I think
another
it's
victory to
important that this
celebrate.
group realize that despite this phenomenal accomplishment that took 10 years, the media coverage of it has been drowned out by a lot of other things that I think are not nearly as significant. Now let's talk about,
Wait, Well, Roger. Let me come back to you for a minute.
yeah,
We're at 4:05. I do want to give 5 minutes to another victory. You raised a victory. We have John Brakey, who's got a victory to announce to us also. Then we'll come back to you, Roger.
sure.
But I do want to mention to everybody, we had an incredibly action-packed. We still have 49 people with us. 2 hours here. We're going to come back to energy to the media with Dave Saltman next week. We will have two women coming on from the refugees from the MAGA Christian nationalist movement, and hopefully we're going to link them up, Mike Hersh, with Anthony from the Rural New Deal. So we've got a tremendous amount, many balls in the air here, but I want to make sure we do finish at 4:20. That's a hard stop. So I do want to get John Brakey, who's been invited to tell us about his victory, amazing victory in the court system, also in New Mexico, in Arizona, next to New Mexico. John, can you tell us about your court victory here, John Brakey?
Well, it was a big victory for the people of Arizona now to know that if they file a public records request, they won't be sued by the jurisdiction.
Was it
That's
dismissed
amazing.
without prejudice yet?
Well, I'm still working on that part because they didn't find bad faith. And the lawyer, I'm filing a bar complaint on him. We're asking for a reconsideration because this guy made up things. I mean, he even claimed in the Maricopa lawsuit that I was suing for cast vote records. I haven't sued for a cast vote record in my state since 2007 when we freed them, okay? And the
So,
only
John
reason they
Brakey, the
stopped
bottom
giving
line
them
here,
is because of Santa Cruz County. What?
in a county court, you were sued in Arizona for the temerity of asking for public records,
Yeah.
and you have now won your suit against that attack on you. Is that correct?
That is correct. And they lost 3 times. This is the 3rd time they lost. And it's a private firm who the county hired, and the county attorney wouldn't do it. But they are a very corrupt county. I'm an investigator, and I've investigated a lot more than ballots and ballot images. A $37 million heist. The county attorney money's missing out of his federal account. The board, the assessor got picked up by the FBI for taking bribes. The county recorder built a system to cheat on her own election. The election clerk lied, on an open court. I mean, it's one of those kind of counties, but it's a border county. It's on the border. And my commitment is, I'm from there, my wife, is that this is not over until they form an election integrity commission, okay, and focus on transparency. And these bureaucrats need to realize that they need to be so transparent that we can see their friggin' underwear.
Well, I prefer not to see their underwear.
I
But
don't either, but that's a Chuck
thank you for
Huckleberry
that.
quote. I
And,
love that quote.
so you have won your case after many
3 years.
months, 3 years. And John, congratulations on that. And come back and keep us
I
posted.
will.
It's truly amazing. Thank God for that. And by the way, if you recover the $50,000 that the FBI gave John Homan, the border czar, we'd appreciate that as well.
Well, it's a border town. You don't know what's going on there. But it's a great
everybody,
place. I love Santa Cruz County, Nogales, and it's my base county, even though I live in Pima. And thank you, Harvey, and everybody, what you guys are doing. It takes courage for all of us to do what we do in these trying times. And it's people like us that's going to make a difference by inspiring other people and base it all on love. That's what I base my work on.
Well, if anybody wants to see the state of our justice system, I watched for 10 minutes today the hearing of Sheldon Whitehouse with Pam Bondi, the head of the Trump, Grand Inquisitor unit. And
Yeah.
you just got to, it's just mind-boggling. John
I
Bricky,
posted
hero.
on the site here two different stories. One that I wrote, that another really fabulous independent journalist wrote. And you can Google it. We got about 8 or 10 stories out there now, working all across Arizona.
Well,
And
good for you,
hopefully
John.
it may go
Again,
national.
congratulations on your victory, and we
Thank you.
appreciate it. Roger Rappaport, we're going to come back to you quickly because you've been invited, and then we'll finish with Tatanka and MYLA, and we'll be done. Everybody will go toke up at 4:20. This has been a hell of a session. Still have 47 people with us, and we will be back next week with a lot to talk about. But go ahead. Oh, and Robert Cesario, you've had a hand as well. Okay, Roger, go ahead. Fill us in.
So on a week ago, Monday, on the 20th, Palisades received its shipment of nuclear fuel to relaunch the Palisades reactor, which had been shut down for 3 years. On the following day, the plant made history. As far as we know, the first time in the history of the nuclear industry that an employee fell into the reactor cavity, which was full of water, ingested water. Two other workers fished him out. He was sent, he was decontaminated by the radiation protection personnel, had a count of 300 counts per minute detected in their hair. And the NRC was notified. But from Holtec's perspective, they brought in well over 1,000 workers to try to get this plant going as soon as possible because they have a initial public offering next year to sell stock in the company. But unfortunately, from their point of view, the approval of the final steps to start the reactor going has been held up because of the budget impasse. Most of the NRC has been shut down, including the Public Information Office, which means that no news is coming out of the NRC at all. There's a complete blackout on what actually happened, although we assume there's an investigation going on. So at this moment, Holtec is asking for a series of exemptions so that it can begin operating this plant. And they've asked for exemptions from a number of regulations that are required of all nuclear power plants. They don't want to demonstrate that the steam generator tube integrity across the entire plant has been successful. The NRC has not approved outstanding questions on fire protection compliance and design basis documentation. This plant has not met the fire protection compliance requirement for over 40 years. That's how long these requirements have been waived. And Holtec is asking for a further exemption. And you know that two plants, both 3 Mile Island and Browns Ferry, caught fire. And as a result of that, the standards were changed for all the plants, and Holtec is trying to get out of it. They also have not approved physical modification to meet the deterministic SIFI criteria of NRC regulation. And we still don't know if NRC inspection and testing is sufficient to support fuel loading. But perhaps the most interesting of all of these things is that Holtec has asked for an exemption to allow its workers to work beyond the time limit that's required of all nuclear power plant employees, similar to what's done in the aviation industry. The NRC wrote them back and said, well, we kind of think maybe they've already been working extra hours. We're not really sure. Could you clarify whether or not you're already doing this? So the net impact of these exemption requests, if successful, would give Holtec the ability to postpone required safety valve upgrades, pushing them further in the future. It would allow them not to install valves essential for shutting the plant down safely if there was a fire or power failure occurs, that they would not have to provide the necessary safety analysis or follow the NRC rules for changing its license. And they'd be exempted from submitting a required license amendment with safety evaluations required of every single nuclear power plant in the country. So what this means is very simple. One way or another, this plant is going to have something happen. It's already happened last week, that is unpredictable, that will probably require a shutdown of some kind for an indeterminate amount of time if we're lucky. If we're not so lucky, that would be the best case scenario. Something goes wrong, they shut it down, they reevaluate. The worst case scenario is what we call an event that would release radiation, and we already had workers contaminated last week and uncontaminated, and there would be what's called reputational damage. Here's an example of reputational damage. In Chernobyl, there was a meltdown of a reactor, and as a result of that event, the entire region, of course, is no longer inhabited. We've seen it at Fukushima. We've seen it at 3 Mile Island. Reputational damage means that the amount of publicity around this event is so intense that there's a pushback from the community. This actually happened at Indian Point, where there was a release, and as a result of the radiation release, whatever it was, the plant was forced to close due to public opinion. So imagine now that there's some release of radiation that has to be reported, just like this accident. And imagine that we don't know, because guess what? The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as we've just seen, had a blackout. But let's just say for some reason they don't know how bad it is or where the radiation is going. You can imagine what this is going to do to real estate values. You can imagine what it's going to do to agriculture, and you can imagine what it's going to do to the nuclear industry itself. So Holtec, because it's trying to go public, is in this mad dash to get this plant up and operating. But if there is a nuclear, if they have a tube failure in the steam generator, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why the previous energy operator, Entergy, closed it, because they knew they needed a new steam generator. This organization, which has never operated a nuclear power plant for a single day in its history, is doing this phenomenal rush job to try to get this plant open. So in a worst case scenario, there could be a panic, there could be an evacuation, anything could happen. It could be like Fukushima or Chernobyl, whether or not there's a meltdown. That's what I'm trying to say. So this has tremendous impact on the upcoming election. It's almost impossible to overstate how badly this story is being ignored. Kevin, who's been working on this for 32 years, has been right from day one. And this is this is the October surprise from my point of view. This is it, because what happens is, if these guys are wrong, and we've already seen this unprecedented accident where a worker fell in. How could somebody fall into a nuclear reactor? It's never happened. I mean, it's impossible, but it happened. And this is an example of their lack of defense in depth, which is required of every single nuclear plant operating today, period. They don't have it. And it's because the plant was built wrong. They sued their contractors. Two very experienced companies, Michigan, the Michigan utility, Mishcon, and then one of the top nuclear power plant fleet operators in the world have given up. And not a single nuclear power plant operator in the world was willing to touch this plant with a 10-foot control rod, okay? Period. And what that means is, at Constellation Energy, which is restarting 3 Mile Island, which, by the way, does meet most of the requirements, is taking 3 years to get it going. And yet we have Holtec trying to do it at light speed. So if this plant isn't stopped soon, there's unlimited ways that something could go wrong. And God forbid radiation starts coming out of this plant, regardless of what the NRC says or anybody says. Once that word gets out, who knows what the reaction is going to be.
And there's no NRC,
There's no NRC. They have inspectors that are still working, but the public relations office is closed. So we still don't know what happened last Tuesday, the day after the nuclear fuel arrived. So what I'm telling this group is, look out, because it's almost inevitable that something is going to happen here. It already happened last week. And the only question is when, and hopefully nobody will get hurt and the plant will just be shut down. because it's not working right, and that'll be the end of it. But if there's any kind of radiation leak, there could be, with the misinformation and lack of information, it's impossible to know what could happen. And when people realize, for example, that their homeowner's insurance doesn't cover a nuclear accident, God forbid. I mean,
Exactly.
God forbid how the public is going to react to this.
Right. So with no, I couldn't even make this up. We're at 4:20. We can do 10 more minutes. Thank you, Roger Rappaport from Western Michigan. An incredible report. We're going to have to come back to this next week. Mind-boggling. So we have Robert Cesario, then MYLA and Tatanka, and then we'll be done. We still have 40 some people with us. It's fantastic. What an incredible 2.5 hours. Go ahead, Robert Cesario.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak briefly. What I have to say ties in somewhat with what Anthony was talking about earlier, that great presentation on the Rural New Deal and Ruby.
Yeah.
I had the great fortune to work with Anthony and Alan Minsky last spring in preparing proposals to the Missouri Democratic Party, which were adopted in June of 24 at our state convention in full support of the Rural New Deal and the National Infrastructure Bank. Speaking about that, rather than going into details, I'd like to put a link in the chat to a great talk that's going to go on tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Central Time by the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition, featuring Congresswoman Delia Ramirez from Chicago.
Okay, thank you. Put that in, please.
There it is. Welcome.
And we will have Anthony back next week, hopefully with the Andra and the presentation on the MAGA refugees. Thank you for that, Robert, and thank you for your patience. I appreciate you having stuck with us so long. Okay, Tatanka and then MYLA.
Okay. Thank you, Harvey. So one important fact that I didn't bring up earlier, and then one bit of good news. The important fact is that those patents that the federal government seized or gave to aerospace, the reason they're being held secret for the last 80 years, that's how old I am, and that's how long they've been doing this, is for national security. Meaning that all the Tesla, I'm talking Nikola Tesla, not Tesla automobiles, the free energy solutions that human beings have designed that could be available to us, that would do away with the petroleum industry and all the extractive industries. The reason they're being denied us is for national security, okay? Which means that the military is involved. The good news is that, and if this is happening to one person I know who has an energy company that has been slowly growing, but is substantial now, it's $1 billion company now. And I'm not at liberty to talk about this, but by January 1, we'll be coming out with an energy device for any home that can take care of all your home's needs, all your auto needs, et cetera, and excess to sell back to the grid. And this is a free energy machine. So humans are going to come out with this regardless if they have enough, enough economic support and they take the step of actually making it available. So I agree that I remain positive, and part of the reason I remain positive is that we should have been dead so many times already with nuclear. We all know the stories that we call miracles, but they're human beings that make this stuff and human beings that have prevented disasters from happening. And in the energy field, there are going to be things that hit both in the health field and in the energy field that are really stunning and helpful for humanity.
Good. Let's hear more about it. Okay, come back with us.
Right.
Thank you so much, MYLA RESON, and then we're going to go.
I want to congratulate Kevin for your very hard work and this victory in stopping the high-level radioactive waste from waste facility in southeastern New Mexico. As you may know, there already is a dump for plutonium-contaminated nuclear weapons waste in that area, right near the Carlsbad National Caverns. It's called the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, known as WIP. It opened in 1999. I worked as a community organizer from 1988 until 1999, trying to stop that facility from opening. So when you talk about, I'm glad that you prevented the high-level radioactive waste from being transported across the country, but we already have plutonium-contaminated nuclear weapons waste since 1999 that has been transported from various nuclear weapons facilities all across the country. So, I was just hoping, Kevin, that when you talk about, this area, it is train's going by right now. I apologize for the noise. But it was back then deemed as a sacrifice area. And unfortunately, the waste isolation pilot plant, which the Environmental Protection Agency said would keep that Westinghouse and the Department of Energy could prevent the waste from from reaching the accessible environment for 10,000 years. It was certified as such that it would keep the waste from reaching the environment from 10,000 years. It failed 9,985 years ahead of schedule, 15 years after it opened. Plutonium escaped from the facility. It contaminated numerous workers who were above ground. And then they just did a quick fix-up of the facility, and they're accepting this plutonium contaminated nuclear weapons waste again. So it's ongoing.
Okay. Thank you for that, MYLA, and thank you, everybody. Kevin, I'll give you the last word here. And again, we'll be back next week with all this stuff. Still 47 of us with us. Thank you so much. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, MYLA's right. It's why Holtec chose that location. It's only 16 miles from the WIP site. The Texas dump, same thing. The high-level waste, we hope we can still stop from going to Texas, but the Texas dump is a national low-level radioactive waste dump serving 36 or more states. It replaced South Carolina in that dubious distinction. And the reason they set up shop in that neck of the woods was because WIP was gotten away with. And maybe folks have heard about it, but the use of inappropriate kitty litter in waste barrels at WIP led to a chemical reaction and explosion underground
Right.
that led to a 3-year shutdown that led to a $3 billion price tag. They've had to shut down whole sections of the WIP underground, and people now have to wear full radiation protection, hazardous material suits, and respiration to go underground at WIP. They didn't used to.
Please let me tell you that the story about the kitty litter is a hoax. They needed an explanation. They were never able to prove that it really was the kitty litter. That was the story.
Yeah, Don Hancock, who's a 50-plus year watchdog on WIP, has followed it closely, and they've spent many millions or tens of millions of dollars trying to recreate the chemical reaction, and they never have. So there's truth to that, but it's the one they put out there as the official version.
My understanding is that a radioactive cat went into the underground and pooped all over the place, and that's what happened. So we'll deal with it, and we'll come back to this, MYLA. And Kevin will get this straightened out. In the meantime, this has been a phenomenal session, as always. Thank you, Steve Caruso, and everybody involved. Ron Leonard, also, thank you so much for opening us up with renewables, and I want to produce the document that will show how we can convert to renewables 100%. Again, everybody, thank you. No nukes, and we will see you in a week. God help us. What? Oh, and Tim and Carl Grossman also. Tim Judson, Carl Grossman. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week. No nukes, everybody.
No nukes, and it's smarter and cheaper to move renewables.
There you go.